Hey, welcome to 0.7, some odds and ends. So in this lesson, we're going to do kind of a pile of different things, but in general, we're going to use string and Boolean data types better, more thoroughly, and we're going to learn augmented assignment operators and how to use Boolean operators and, or, and not. And we're going to be writing some selective code with Boolean operators. In other words, we're going to be writing if statements with conditions with some of these and, or, and not operators. Okay, so we're going to begin with escape characters. So example 1 says, write a program to output the following. Q, what do dentists call an astronaut's cavity? Answer, a black hole. Hardy har har. Well, let's do this. Let's actually... Let's do this example 1. So I've got 0.7 notes ready to go here. We'll call this example 1 escape characters. Okay, so we'll type print and we'll type Q colon what do dentists call an astronaut's cavity. So what you'll notice as you're doing this, and some of you may have run into this problem already, is that, right, as soon as we type this single quote here, right, the string stops because this is actually the character that tells Python that we're done our string, right? So, this single quote here actually closed off the string that began here with Q. So how do we fix this? Well, this is an example of a problem we can fix with an escape character. An escape character is basically a bunch of special characters that you can't normally put in a string, like a new line or a tab or a single quote if you're already using quotes, or a double quote if you're already using double quotes. And the way to write an escape character is literally just put a backslash in front of it. So we can go up here and fix this problem by putting a backslash in front of that single quote, because really we want that as part of the string, right? Instead of to end the string. And then we can go over here and delete this one so that we have an end to our string. And now what you'll see is that that should print properly. Let's finish here and type print a colon a black hole, and we'll run the program and we should see this output properly. So there we go. What do dentists call an astronaut's cavity? You can see the little apostrophe in there, a black hole. Okay, so there's a bunch of other escape characters that are pretty handy. So if you actually wanted to print a backslash, right, you could actually just put two backslashes in, right? Let's just look at this in the terminal. So if we start Python, we'll try each of these as we go. And we type print, and we'll do some quotes. So if we type backslash, right, then we'll see that it will print a backslash, right? If we type print quote backslash single quote, again, right here, we'll see a single quote. So all of these should do something. So we could even do backslash double quote, right? Even though we've already used double quotes, and we should see that backslash show up. Now, two special ones are the new line and the tab. So the new line is one that I used quite often. And what this does is gets us an extra enter, a carriage return. So we can put this at the beginning of our string, for example, to get a second line, right? A blank line before our string. Cats. So we can type that, and you can see now we got this little space here before cats. Right? And you can actually put in as many of these as you want. You can say, if you want 3 spaces, you can put /n/n/n cats. And then we'll get 3 spaces before cats. So this is a handy way of breaking up your string and adding new line characters wherever necessary. So here's an example of this. Example 2 says copy, paste, and modify the following code so that it prints the double spaced. So that it prints double spaced. So we want an extra line after each of these things. So if we cut and paste this up here, we'll call this example 2 new line escape character. There we go. And we'll paste this in here. Okay. And feel free to also, when while you're watching this, feel free to have Edsby open, right? This lesson open, so you can cut and paste this. I've put this in a block for you here, so that you can select it directly and cut and paste it into your lesson note. All right, so if we wanted to make this print double spaced, well, what we could do is add a little new line character at the end of each line. And I just want to show you something really nifty that you can do here in VS Code. So if we want to do the same thing, we want to type the same thing at the end of every one of these lines right before the quote, what you can do is create multiple cursors at those locations. So holding Alt, what you can do is put your first cursor here right at the end of the string where we're going to type our new line. Then holding Alt, click the next end, and you'll see another one start blinking. And keep holding Alt, and you can put that in 4 places. And now you can type /n, and it shows up in all 4 places. Then press Escape when you're done, and now we have a new line in all 4 of those spots. We'll press F5 to see this run, and we'll see here now we have a space after each line. Also notice how VS Code highlights these escape characters, so they kind of leap off the page at you. You can't mistake them for anything else. Okay, and so of course, what we also could have done to solve this first problem here is put this whole sentence in double quotes, because we planned on using a single quote or a single, like an apostrophe right here, right? So Python is of course smart enough to recognize the difference between a double quote and a single quote. So if you want to actually print a single quote, then put your string in double quotes, and vice versa. If you want to print a double quote inside a string, then put your string in single quotes. Now in some situations, we want to create a string that spans several lines, and we want some new lines, some enters, actually to be part of this string. And so to do this, what we can do is use triple quotes. And we can start this by pressing quote, quote, typing quote, 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 and then a multi-line string, and then finally another quote, quote, quote. Now, unless we assign this big string to a variable, it will get ignored, right? So often, because these are ignored by default, unless they're assigned to a variable, these are used to write comments and to write things that take multiple lines, like to write notes to the user or programming descriptions of code or functions. So for example, we could type something like this, quote, quote, quote. Well, we did this in stepwise refinement, right, where we typed our pseudocode in front of our example. So, hello, how are you today? Great. How are you? And then finally when we're done, another 3 quotes, and it is done. And like I said, we could add this, we could assign this string to a variable. If we went right up to the beginning and we typed multi str or whatever variable you want to use equals, right? And then we would be assigning this multi-line string to this variable here, right? So we could then print this and print multi str, and we would see that at the end. So let's press F5 again here. And you'll see right here we have our new line from the previous example. Then we have the blank line that was actually right here at the beginning of our multi-line string. Then the 2, and then another blank line after, which is from the carriage return. That's at the end that we pressed here. So we literally pressed Enter here, right, to get to the next line. And so that was carried over into our string here. Okay, so this brings us to the end keyword of the print function. So this is something that we looked at briefly in 0.3, but I just want to look at it in a little more detail here. So let's look at example 3. It says, using a loop, print the numbers 1 to 20 in A in a horizontal line with no breaks, and B separating by a comma and a space, without a comma at the end. Okay, well, let's look at the answer for the first one. Well, if we were to print these in a horizontal line, we could simply set, with no spaces, no breaks, we could simply set the end keyword to nothing. And this would cause this print function not to have this carriage return after each line. So let's just have a look at this. We'll paste this in here. We'll call this example 3, print keyword end. Okay, and we'll paste that code in there. Of course, we have to indent this block, and let's comment out everything else. There we go, Control/. Okay, and we'll run this, and we should see it print a line of numbers. There we go, 1, 2, 3, all the way across, right? So this end keyword overrode the natural behavior of the print function, which tacks a carriage return onto every single line. Okay, let's look at the next one. Well, part B says, let's comment this out. Part B says to do it this time with a comma and a space, but without one at the end. So let's look at what this code does. And in this case, we've got to put this all in a for block and then indent these two as well. Okay, so this is now going to go from 1 to 20, right? And notice how I've got some conditions in here, right? So if I is less than 20, right? So it goes up to 19, then it's going to print I followed by, and what this means is what it's going to attach to the end is a comma and a space, right? So it's going to attach this to the end of I, right? And it's going to go back and increment I. I will keep getting bigger and bigger. But as soon as I equals 20, which is the very last number in the range object, it's going to go down to the else, and it's going to print the last one without it. So let's run that to see. So there we go, right? We have this nice list now of numbers from 1 to 20 separated by commas and spaces. Okay, let's now look at another cool thing you can do in Python, which is to multiply strings. So this is kind of a fun thing you can do. Let's do this in the terminal. So type Python with me, and we'll type the string A times 3. So times string A times 3. And you can see we get A. Let's type blah times 10. So we go blah times 10. And you can see we have now got 10 blahs all concatenated with each other. So this is kind of a nice way to expand a string a number of times, right? To repeat that string. And it will automatically concatenate this string, basically the number of times that you indicate here, right? So, so if you have 2, you'll see 2. If you have 3, you'll see 3, and etc. So next is augmented assignment operators. So one of the major principles of good coding is called DRY, which stands for don't repeat yourself. In other words, the best code is efficient and concise, and the same blocks of code do not appear over and over. So when incrementing or modifying variables, so far we've used an old school convention, okay, where we repeat the variable in the right side of the assignment. So, right, so we've done this whenever we wanted to increment, like to add something to a variable. So in other words, if we want to add 1 to x, we just say x is equal to the value of x plus 1, right? But Python has a way cooler way to do this that adheres to this DRY principle. And so here is how it is. So this is an example here of an augmented assignment operator, a plus equals 1. So what this means is add 1 to a. Right, so this is the same thing as a equals a plus 1. A equals a minus 1. So we're taking away 1 from a. Well, how do we do that? We can just write a minus equals 1. And this will subtract 1 from a. And of course, you can put whatever you want here for 1. You can add or subtract whatever you want to a, of course. Another variable or a different number. If you want to double a, right? A equals a times 2. This would double a. Well, here you can just write a times equals 2. Okay, and again, if you want to divide a in half, well, just write a divided equals 2. So from now on, okay, use the operators on the right, these ones, for modifying variables and doing arithmetic. Okay, next is Boolean AND. So we already know that when the interpreter evaluates a Boolean expression, right, it's always going to be either true or false, right? And we've been using simple conditions like x is greater than or equal to 5. Now, what we're going to look at is compound expressions, which are joined with conjunctions and or. So, to understand these, what we're going to do is look at some sentences, because I think this makes sense better in English. So think of the sentence, cats have whiskers and dogs have tails. Well, we know that cats have whiskers is true. And we also know that dogs have tails is also true. So is this sentence actually true? Well, of course, it's only true if these two things are both true, right? Because it says cats have whiskers and dogs have tails. So this entire sentence is, in fact, true. Now, what if the sentence read, cats have whiskers and dogs have wings? This would, of course, be false, right? Because dogs don't have wings, even though cats do have whiskers, right? So in Boolean logic, this is how things work, right? Things can only ever be entirely true or entirely false in Boolean logic. And because of this word and, it makes the entire sentence true if and only if both parts are true. If one or both parts are false, then the entire sentence is false. Let's look at a couple of these. In fact, we can just type the Boolean values true and false with and in between them to see what they produce. So in the terminal, we'll type true and true, and you can see that the interpreter says true, right? Because we used the conjunction and. Now, if we typed true and false, what do you think is going to happen? Well, of course, we're going to get false because both true and false were not true, right? This false basically made the whole thing not true. Okay, so then let's just try typing false and true. Well, of course, here, because false is included and we need both of them to be true, we're going to get false again. And of course, if we type false and false, then we're going to get something that evaluates to false, because nothing is true. False is not true, and false is not true, right? So this is only going to be true if both are true, both conditions, right? So this is like, how do we use this? Well, before we move on, if we type something like 4 is greater than 3 and 1 is greater than 0, right? Well, how would this work? Well, this 4 is greater than 3, that's going to evaluate to true, right? And 1 is also greater than 0. So if we press enter, we're going to get true. But say we said something that was not true. We said 3 is greater than 4 and 1 is greater than 0, right? Well, it's clear that this is not true, right? So because this one's not true, all of this is false. This whole expression evaluates to false. Okay, the next one is Boolean OR. Now, Boolean OR works similar to AND in that it joins two conditions, okay? But the thing that's different is that it evaluates to true if either of the true Boolean values is true. So, in fact, the only time the OR operator evaluates to false is if both of the values or conditions evaluate to false. So we're going to type these same things in, but we're going to change it to OR, right? So if we type true or true, well, either one needs to be true, right? And we get true. And so if we type true or false, well, because this part is true, right? This is going to be true. So, and false, again, false or true is going to be true because we had at least one thing, right, in this entire condition, conjunction. This condition was true. Whereas if we type false or false, now this time at least one of them needs to be true, but neither of them are, right? And so that is, of course, false. So if we go back to these numerical examples that we did up here, right? We know that this one was true because both 4 is greater than 3 and 1 is greater than 0, right? But this one was false because this part was not true. But if we used OR, then what do you think would happen? Well, let's try it. So if we said 3 is greater than 4, well, we know that's true, right? Or that's false. Or 1 is greater than 0. Well, we know that's true, right? And since this is true, okay, this evaluates to true because either of these, because one of these was true. So what I encourage you to do here is before we go on to Boolean NOT, is pause the video, right, and experiment with some of these conditions until you can predict how they'll evaluate, right? You can be using any of the conditions we've worked with previously, like you can be comparing strings or values of numbers like this, and once you're done, we'll go on to Boolean NOT. Okay, so Boolean NOT really does one simple thing. all it does is switches the truth of the next expression, the one that follows not. So let's see what happens if we put not in front of true. So if we type not true, well, I would hope you'd expect that not true evaluates to false, right? Because what this means is instead of this true, this means false, right? So of course, if we say not false, this is going to be true, right? And so the language here should hold up. What if we said not true and false? Well, let's think about this. So what this means is, not true, of course, just means false, right? So this says false and false, which we know is going to be false because neither of these are true, and they would both have to be true. What about not true and not false? Well, what does this mean? This means false and true, right? So this is going to be false because, again, both of them are not true. And we used and. Remember, and means every single thing, both things around it have to be true. Okay, how about true and not false? Well, this time we have true, so that's good. And true, right? So this, not false, means true. So this should evaluate to true. All right, the next one, not false and not false. So not false and not false. Well, really, this means the same thing, right? Because not false is just true. So we have true and true. So here we get true again. Okay, and there's a few more here. I'll just type them in real quickly. See if you can predict what these will do. Not, true, or true. So if you have brackets, okay, you think of order of operations here, right? Order of operations says do the brackets first. And of course, the Python interpreter will do this as well, right? So it's going to look inside the brackets. It's going to evaluate this compound condition, true or true, which we know is going to be true, right? Because at least one of them was true. In fact, they both were. But then since this is going to be true, right, it's going to flip this not function, okay? This not a function really, but it's saying it's going to invert the value from true to false, right? So this is going to be false because even though this part in the brackets is true, not changes it to false. What about not false or true? Well, here again, this is false because we had a true inside, and so this evaluated to true and then got flipped to false. Not false and false. Be sure you use capital letters on these, right, guys? So this time, false and false evaluated to false because well, they both would have had to have been true to be true, right? But then not flipped this to true. And finally, not true and false. Well, what would this one do? Think about this for a moment. Well, this time we would still need both this and this to be true in order for this to be true. So this is going to be false, but then it's going to get flipped to true. So there's one last idea here, just to clarify, and it's something called Boolean precedence. And this really just helps us understand how Python will work through a Boolean expression, a compound Boolean expression. And precedence is a word that means more important, okay, in computer science. So in Boolean logic, the operator AND has precedence over OR. This means that any expressions involving AND will be evaluated first before any OR operators come into play. So let's confirm this with the terminal. So have a look here. I'm just actually going to cut and paste these into the terminal. True and true, or false and false. So if we look at this compound condition here, we have to look at wherever we see AND, okay, it's going to take the two things beside the AND and it's going to evaluate that before it gets to OR. Right? So this here, this true and true is going to be evaluated first. This false and false is going to be evaluated next. And then finally, whatever we get on each side of this OR is going to be checked to see if either of these are true. Right? So think about this for a moment, pause the video, and consider what this will evaluate to. Okay, so hopefully you thought about this. Maybe you noticed over here that true and true is going to be true, right? This false and false is going to be false, but since we have true or false, because of OR, and this is true, that means we'll get true. Okay, let's try the next one. So we'll paste this one in here. So now we have true and false. Well, we know that's not true, right? Because false is here. Or false and true. Well, this is also not true, right? This and. And so we're going to end up with false or false, right? And so, of course, this will be false. Let's do one more, and then I'll leave you the rest to figure out. Okay, so this time, notice how we have not got this or here. Well, we have all these ands, right? So what this will now do is actually go from left to right. It will evaluate false and false, or sorry, false and true. And this will become false because they're not both true. So then we're going to have, right, then in the next line, we're going to have false and false, which we know is false, right? So then now we have, now that's all going to be false. We're up to here now. And then we're going to have false and true, which we know is also false because it's not true and true, right? Which is the only way to get true. So that's going to be false. So there's 3 more there. Now, what I'd like you to do is type these in, cut and paste these into the terminal, and just predict what you think each of these will evaluate to. And remember that that if you see ands and ors, then you have to do the conditions that involve and first, right? So you do those; they're like higher in order of operations. Think of them that way, and then compute the ors. Generally, you work from left to right if you have things that are all of the same precedence, like all ors or all ands. So that's it for this lesson. You have a series of assignments, 0.7 A to D. Good luck with those, and we'll see you in class.